So let me start from the beginning. I'm now here at the seaside in the beautiful southern part of Finland where I live. I moved here 2 years ago together with my wonderful daughter Lumi, and this is my place where I like to come to when I feel, you know, anxious, stressed out, sad, depressed, everything. So it's like my safe space. So I thought it would be the best place to make a video about my daughter's life and her passing, of course. So I will take you back to the beginning, to the year 2020. Lumi was born on the 14th of June in the hospital in Holland, where I grew up and lived for many years. So she was born a perfectly healthy, beautiful baby girl. And as you can see, she is a wonderful girl. Happy, sparkling, smiley. She was growing, she was doing well, until she wasn't doing well anymore. This started to happen around 6 months to 1 year old. She was getting very fragile. She was getting a bit sickly. At some point she stopped really developing, and I noticed that whatever I tried, it wasn't really helping. So, for example, she would have asthma attacks, she would have rashes, she would get extremely high fever. She was not really crawling, she was not moving, she was sick every second week of her life. Every second week of her life, she had something going on. So as you can imagine, I tried everything. I tried to make all her foods organic. I made everything from scratch. I bought this air filter in the house to clean up the air particles, dust, allergens, whatever could trigger her. I used everything organic also for her shampoos and washing her clothes and on her skin. So everything was just natural. So I tried every little thing that I could in her diet, in her clothing, in her environment. But every time, she would lay down, it was like as if she couldn't breathe very well. So I would lift her bed up a bit higher. And it seemed to go a bit better. She was okay in that. But it took her 1.5 years before she would sleep. So for the first 1.5 years, this little girl barely slept. And since I was the sole caretaker of her, I didn't sleep for 1.5 years. And let me tell you, it's really hard. And in my case, it was particularly hard because when I gave birth to Lumi in this hospital, because I had this gestational diabetes, I was medically supervised. I gave birth to her in the natural way because there was no time for any medication. She just came right out popping, and it was really overwhelming and intensely painful. But she came in 15 minutes. So she was born. But what happened afterwards would kind of set the tone for the rest of our lives. I felt an incredible pain in my stomach after I gave birth. The placenta was out as well, and I even asked them, is the placenta intact? Is everything fine? Yes, everything is fine. So I started screaming at some point from pain. I was in so much pain that I almost fell off the hospital bed because I couldn't contain myself. And the nurses told me that I should just calm down. I was just being a bit hysterical because you just gave birth. They said, Amy, you just gave birth, just calm down a little, just don't overreact. And I thought to myself, Are you kidding me? I'm in so much pain. It was worse than giving birth naturally for the first time. What ended up happening was that for 2 hours I was bleeding and I was screaming. And at some point I lost 2.5 liters of blood. And that's when they realized something is wrong. So they indeed rushed me for surgery, and they took out this tiny, tiny little piece of placenta that was still stuck in my uterus that was causing all this pain. And in surgery, I lost another 0.5 liter. So I lost 3 liters of blood in total. So whilst I was still recovering, I was also taking care of my child, but with the help, of course, of my family and amazing friends. And Lumi's father was and still is in the picture as well. And we have a very loving bond also with his family. So that is all good and positive. But what set the tone for the rest of our 4 years together was that in the hospital, they didn't believe me when I told them that something was really wrong. And this would happen every time that I would see the doctor and I would tell them that something is really wrong with my child. They would send us home. And that is still something that it will hurt me for the rest of my life. That nobody believed us. So Lumi got more and more sick, but she was also very happy and sparkly and bubbly and fun and wonderful and such a bright child, such an observative, bright, intelligent child that when I would take her to the doctor, for example, when she was not so ill, then they would say, but you know, the blood tests are fine. Look at her playing. Her heart sounds fine. She's eating. Yeah, she's eating. Okay, so then what's the problem? They did once a CT scan because they thought maybe there was something there because I kept pressing them, please, something is wrong. No, the CT scan is fine. Yeah, we see some infections, but so we will put tubes in her ears and we will take her adenoids out. So that happened as well. And at some point she got a lung infection, a double lung infection. So she came in with a saturation of 70. It was like a total nightmare. She just got extremely ill very fast. And she was in the hospital for 5 days. And there they made like a long scan, so they saw the infection. But for the rest, that was cleared up with antibiotics. And of course, it was quite hard day and night. They were treating her to get better. And she got better. And I thought, okay, now we get to go home again. And that's how it continued, like doctors, minor surgeries. And she was just having all these traumatic experiences and drawing blood and having horrendous medical things done to her that I couldn't explain why it was necessary because she was so small. She was 0, 1, 2, you know, so I was just watching her suffer and try to do the best as I could as a parent, you know, and in those situations. But when your child suffers, you suffer. So the amount of times that I felt so helpless and in pain that I just couldn't sleep. And every night I was looking on Google trying to find out her symptoms, what was wrong. I saw that she wasn't growing well. I saw that she lacked energy. I saw that it looked like she couldn't breathe properly. I saw that her blood flow in her body wasn't well, because sometimes her chest would be totally red and her limbs white. But I thought, what is going on? It seems like it's not fully pumping around. So I kept telling the doctors when we were there that I showed them the symptoms. I made a list always with the dates, that what she had, what was going on. And once a doctor, a pediatrician in a hospital, said to me when I told him about all the symptoms, that now we know all came from a heart disease. the doctor just told me, well, it just is what it is. And I thought, it is what it is. This kid is sick every second week of her life. She took her first steps when she was 19 months old. And I was so proud because I saw this kid struggle. Anyways, at some point, I also told them that, hey, at this childcare health center facility, I told them that my daughter is still wearing the same clothes for 1.5 years. Is that normal that she's still wearing the same clothes for so long? She's not growing, and then they do their measurements and then they say, well, she is at the bottom line, but it's still on the bottom line. So she's just a bit sensitive and, growing at her own pace. And I thought, yeah, no, a child should just grow a little bit more than 1 centimeter a year. It was literally 1 centimeter. She got the best foods, I gave her the best that I could, all the right proteins and fats and everything. So, but nothing worked. And then at some point, I felt that I have to save my child because I saw how sick she was. But I also had a repeating vision. And now I know it was God's way of preparing me for what would come. Because when Lumi was 1 year old, I started to have this vision where I would open her bedroom door and she would lay in bed. She wasn't alive anymore. And I could never understand it, what I was seeing, but it was like a movie played in my head. And I was looking at the movie, but I was also in the movie. I saw this vision throughout the years, multiple times, maybe about 10 times. The same vision would just pop up. Since I had visions earlier in my life, from God showing me what would happen, I knew this would happen as well. And I didn't want to believe it. I thought this is just a fear of mine. I couldn't understand what I was seeing. And I thought, I'm not gonna let this happen. My kid is not going to die. So I'm gonna do everything that I can to save her. So my whole mission was to save my child. So I saw she wasn't doing well and she wasn't thriving, although she was still so beautiful and so happy. She was so, so happy. So since I was born in Finland, and I used to come here every year to visit my family, and it's such a beautiful country. It's so amazing, and clean air and fresh foods and beautiful nature. 75% of the country is just trees. It's forest. 75%. So I thought that's exactly what my girl needs. So I quit my job. I had a wonderful job in Holland that I loved so much. Worked in the field of psychiatry with mental health patients. And it was the best job that I ever had. I loved my colleagues, but I especially loved all the clients that we had. And I had. It was a very grateful job. Sometimes very heavy, but wonderful. So I quit that job after so many years. I sold my house, and my daughter and I moved to Finland, and we found our soul home. We were guided to this amazing place. I always had this idea how I would want to live, but then this house came along and it was even better than I could have dreamt of. So it was like a gift, and this house felt like a gift after years of struggling, after years of not sleeping, seeing my child suffer, nobody helping us, nobody believing us. so much pain and suffering and blood from her, from these surgeries and treatments and her trauma. She was so traumatized from all these things. If she would see a doctor in a white coat, she would start screaming in panic. So then we start our new life here in Finland, and everything is going well. For the first time in our lives, everything was going well. She was finally thriving, and she would be outdoors for hours and hours on end, playing with her new friends and just enjoying nature and life. And she was in awe and in wonder of this place. And she would say, "Mama, it's so beautiful. Mama, our house is so beautiful. Here, the trees, it's so beautiful." And we would smell all the flowers, and we would just have, a great time. We were outside a lot and just living life. And what I would finally see, what I never saw before, and I only realized in that moment, was that she would have red cheeks from the fresh air, from blood flow, from oxygen. She would finally have, some color in her cheeks. And I remember saying that out loud, I think maybe to my mother, that, hey, she finally has some color in her face. And other people close to us started to notice that as well, that, whoa, she's finally thriving. This is like the best decision you could have ever made. And I couldn't agree more. She was happy, I was happy. It was everything that we ever wanted, to live outside together with nature. We were picking all kinds of berries just in front and around our house. The wild blueberries, the raspberries, strawberries. So much to pick and eat and to live off here from the land. So it was a wonderful experience, and it was literally just 1 year. We only got to have 1 year together in Finland. I remember going to the child healthcare center here in Finland, and I told them our whole history of what had happened and how difficult life had been in Holland and how sick Lumi always was. And that I was still worried, because what I did start to notice, although she was doing so much better and she was barely sick anymore, maybe sick once in a few months, like regular children. So I was so hopeful, and I had the literal thought that we made it. She's okay, we are okay. But deep down, I also knew something was very wrong. I just didn't want to see it, but I knew it. I still had this vision sometimes popping up once in so many months that she was deceased, lying in her bed. And I just could never see clearly, was she 3 years old, 4 years old, 5 years old, but something around that range. And by the time that we were in Finland, she was 3 going on 4. And I remember saying in the child healthcare center what I was talking about, that I'm still worried because I see her playing with the neighbor girls. And they were about the same age. They are running around, playing, climbing on the rocks, on the hills, going up and down. And Lumi would do it for maybe 5 minutes, and then she would have to stop and catch her breath because she just couldn't do it anymore. So I thought, why is that? Yeah, of course she was a bit weaker and she was a bit slower and vulnerable, but I had a bad feeling about it. So I kept telling everybody who wanted to hear that Lumi was doing well, but also I was a bit worried. But everyone would say that, but look at her, and she is fine, and she looks well, she's eating. And even at the healthcare center. When I said that, no, but I'm not sure, there's still something wrong. The woman looked at me and said, Annie, how are you doing? Are you sure that you are fine? Because Lumi is okay. I just checked her and there's nothing. So how are you? And when she said it in that tone, in that manner, I knew what time it was. And I thought, goodness gracious, here we go again. Again, nobody believes me. Everybody thinks it's me just imagining that my child is not well. So then at some point I kind of let it go. Because I thought, well, I guess it's me. Everybody says she's fine. All the blood tests came back fine, all the checkups and the things. And look at her now, and she's playing, and she just, needs a bit more extra time, like children sometimes have. So I thought, well, okay, sure. And then everything started to go downhill at once. So it was the 23rd of June. We just celebrated her 4th birthday. Me and my sister went to Norway with her because we went to a classical concert that Lumi loved a lot. Because we love to listen to classical music and move on it and dance on it. So we went to Oslo for that. So there I am sitting with the 4-year-old girl listening to the opera singers and the cello players, and she was the only kid over there, of course, but it was amazing and she was so happy and we had such a wonderful, wonderful time, not knowing that exactly 1 week later, it was the beginning of the end. I went to a beautiful seaside place near our hometown. And we just went for a little stroll. We wanted to have some lunch, and before the lunch place opened, we went to sit outside. And we were sitting at the waterside. There were barely any people. It was a beautiful day. The sun was bright, and the boats were passing us by slowly. The birds were flying, and it was literally as if time stood still. And now I've learned, and I've heard from many other people, when just before tragedy would struck, sometimes a day before, sometimes an hour before, sometimes a week before, they would suddenly have this very clarifying moment that was suddenly so conscious, where they would look at their loved one or their loved ones and think to themselves, but what an angel, what a beautiful person. They would feel so grateful for their loved one, for their presence, and they would be so consciously aware of them suddenly as if it was magnified. And I always say that happens because heaven knows that your loved one is coming. So I had this moment myself with my daughter at this seaside. For 1 hour, me and this just 4-year-old girl were just sitting there on the deck, watching the water and the birds and the boats, and there were no distractions, no phones, no nothing. We would just look at the sky and have a little talk here and there, and I thought, wow, this is what life is all about. And in the meantime, I have mosquitoes here as well because we're in a forest in Finland. So we had our lunch, and before we headed home, I told my daughter that let's go to the bathroom first before we step into the car for our drive. So I put her on the toilet and she suddenly started screaming, and I mean screaming. And I thought, well, I heard her scream before, so I was not worried at once, like what was happening. Then I told her, but hey, maybe you just have to pass the stool, it will be fine, don't worry. And then she screamed at me that no, it's not fine and it will not get better. And that's when she screamed that last sentence on top of her lungs. Her eyes rolled back and she would just literally collapse with her head on the tile floor, bathroom floor. So in a reflex, I tried to grab her out of the air, but I couldn't prevent anymore that her head would hit the tiles. And only of that sound already, her head hitting these tiles, she fell so high. From that sound alone, I thought she would have a concussion. I don't know how she will ever make it out of this. And I turned her around and I looked at her and she didn't breathe and she was totally blue grayish. She was totally blue and gray. And I know what that meant. So I lifted her up and I ran outside to the picnic table where we just had our food, and I screamed to the people that please call 112, call 112 right now. And I started resuscitating her. And I'm so happy and grateful that I knew how to do that, because for my work, working in healthcare, I had to have a lot of first aid diplomas. So I knew what to do. So I was resuscitating my child, and then other people were calling 112, and I saw that she came by and some color came back into her face and in her lips. But I was in such shock because it was my own kid. It was not somebody else. It was my literal child, that I somehow kept on doing the resuscitation. And then at some moment, a person came up to me and said, "Hey, you can stop now, she's okay." So I lifted her off the table and I took her with me into the ambulance that arrived. So in the ambulance she was talking again, and I was speaking with the people, and they said, "Oh, well, maybe she just had a little choke up, from the food that she just had." But I thought, I hope so, but I feel that's not the case, because this is very extreme. She was blue and gray immediately. So we went into the hospital and I spoke with the pediatricians and they did their testing. And two things happened. When they did their testing, I heard the doctor say, "The results are so bad. Are you sure you did them right? Let's do them again." So I thought the results of her EKG were so bad that they thought they made a mistake. And the second thing was, when the pediatrician came to me and she asked me the question, "Did somebody in your family ever suddenly just die?" And I said, "No." But that's the moment I knew enough. And that's the moment I knew that our life would change forever. And when I told the nurses, this is the end of everything, our lives will never be the same. And of course the nurses told me that it's not true. I mean, things get better. So don't worry about it. You don't know yet. I thought, well, of course, it has always been like that. I mean, I already knew they would say something like that. So I've heard it for all those years. Everything is fine. Don't worry. Don't think like that. Don't be like that. So the next day in the children's hospital in Helsinki, in the city, she got an examination and the cardiologist came to me and I was sitting there alone. I didn't sleep the whole night, of course. I sat there with my child and they told me, "Your child has restrictive cardiomyopathy and she will need a heart transplant because it's already so bad that she will die in a maximum of 2 years." So I thought, okay. And the first thing I said to them, the first thing I said when they told me this news was, I knew it. That was literally my answer. Was the only thing I said was, I knew it. Because I have known all this time that there was something really wrong with my child. But nobody believed us. So there I was, alone. And they told me that she would die and that she would need a heart transplant. But even in that moment, I knew that was not going to happen because I knew she would die. She was already so sick. I saw it for so long. So I asked them a few questions and then we were just sent home. We were literally just sent home. I had no information. I had not one phone number to call. I had no follow-up appointment. And to this day, I will never understand how that was possible. I got this deadly terminal diagnosis and I was just sent home. So yeah, that is how life unfolded. And what happened? So eventually I would call the hospital and ask them if we could make a plan because we received this terminal diagnosis and we just got sent home. So we planned a few additional testings so that they could get the full diagnosis. And in this case, what happened is that when they did this echocardiogram, they, of course, made their first diagnosis, and that was it. She would have 2 years to live. And that is why they needed some additional information to see how exactly correct this diagnosis was, or was there maybe something more. So these tests were planned maybe 1 month out. So in the meantime, we just had to wait. And Lumi couldn't sleep at night because she would have a lack of oxygen. So every night I tried to get her to sleep and she was sleeping with me, and I tried to put her a bit high up so that she could breathe easier than when she would sleep on her back. And that was pretty much the only thing I could do because there was nothing else. The doctors, they didn't have enough information yet and they didn't know how severe it ended up to be actually. So then what would happen was a few weeks passed and Lumi got her second attack. She survived this one as well. And what I mean when I say attack is that it comes down to heart failure. To this day, the doctors were never really sure what happened to her, because when the first attack and the second attack happened, she wasn't in the hospital where they could actually monitor what was happening with her. So it was more of a hypothesis that it was heart failure. And to get this additional information about her disease, it meant that she would have to have a catheterization. That means that they would go through her, I don't know the English word for this, but at least at the side of her stomach, they would enter into her lungs and into her heart to measure the pulmonary pressure. And it would be a very invasive. And it's not even a surgery because they're not fixing anything. It's a procedure to get more information. So they told me that this procedure in her condition, there was a very high chance that she wouldn't survive. So they started to prepare me that, okay, if we do this, and we have to do this, because I really tried to discuss with them that can we just give her oxygen, give her medicine, give her anything that she doesn't suffer anymore, but that she can at least breathe. And they said, no, we really need to have this information because otherwise we cannot have the correct diagnosis, and we don't even know what kind of medicine we actually have to give and how much. It was my worst nightmare that she would pass away on this surgery operation table with strangers around her in white coats that she was so scared of. But I knew that we had to do it, so we planned this catheterization. And as you can imagine, the evening before it would happen, I was just on the ground, weeping, crying, pleading with God that please let her survive this. Please don't let her die there on that table, on a surgery table. Please let me take her home. It's all I want, is that my child is at home with me, safe. And then the day came of the procedure, and I had to say goodbye to her, and we had to wait, I think 4 hours. We were just waiting and waiting, because it was such a dangerous procedure that they had to do everything. Even the anesthesia was already very deadly for her. So after hours of waiting, and the doctors entered the room, and the first thing they said is that she's fine, she survived, she's okay, she's fine. The first thing they said. So, of course, we could breathe and think, okay, thank God, thank God. And we were still waiting when she would wake up from the anesthesia. But what they would eventually also tell us was that the pressure that they have measured in her lungs and in her heart was the highest and the worst pressure they have ever seen in anyone, ever. And this disease, this cardiomyopathy, there are different kinds, and she had the restrictive one. The restrictive one, only 5% of everybody that has cardiomyopathy has the restrictive kind, only 5% in the world. And in Finland, she was the 10th person to ever have this disease. So only 9 other people ever had this super rare heart disease. And then to find out that my child was the sickest they have ever seen, I thought, but what are the chances of all of this happening? So she was so sick that they wanted me to sign papers so that they would not be responsible for her death, because they said that, okay, she can literally just die now any moment, any minute from this very moment. She is like a walking time bomb. So I had to sign the papers that, yep, they are free of any responsibility, and they don't have to resuscitate her. So that was the news that we got. So it was even worse than they expected. Then it was time to go and see Lumi, because she was waking up from her anesthesia. And my sister was also there, my mother was there, and they had all flown out to Finland to be with us. And the very first thing that Lumi screamed when she saw me, Lumi screamed to me that I almost died. Mama, I almost died, Mama. And to this day, I will never understand how a 4-year-old child knows or felt that she would die. How did she feel she was dying? How does she know what it is? So she screamed that she almost died, and it was horrendous to hear that. And she was attached to this machine with 100. There were so many tubes and things and going into her body everywhere. And I never saw something like that before in my life. She was yellow and she was feverish. And she was so weak and so sickly again and in so much pain and still half out of this world and in panic and ever so many things were attached to her that I could barely like hold her in my arms because, you know, she would get stuck in them. It's something that no parent wants to see. But I know I'm not the only one who has seen that from their own child. But it will always be a horrendous thing to see, like from a nightmare. After a few days of recovery, she could finally go home. And I was speaking with the palliative care team, with the hospice doctors, with the hospice nurses, about how to give her the oxygen, how the oxygen tanks work, how to give her the morphine and how much midazolam. And luckily I had some experience, of course, in medication because of the work I had in psychiatry, but to give morphine and later on fentanyl to a 4-year-old child, it was really heavy. So once we were home, it was really, really hard because Lumi needed her medicine every 5 hours, so it was a day and night thing. And in the beginning, there were still some family and friends coming over to help, but eventually in the last 2 weeks, it was just me and her. Because of the medicine, Lumi got more and more scared. Her world got very small. And yeah, it was a day and night thing for 2 weeks, just me and her. And of course I tried everything that I could to make her still somewhat happy and smiling, and sometimes it was still working. And she just always wanted to be very close with me on the couch or on the bed or wherever. I just had to stay with her the whole time. And of course I did that because it was the last time that I would hold her. Because I also realized, although I didn't maybe fully realize, but those 2 weeks would be the last 2 weeks of our lives together forever. So I was guiding her slowly into her death. And I tried the very best that I could. And the hospice nurses and doctors would sometimes come by, but it would freak her out because she was already, like I said before, so scared that she would start screaming, and then she needed oxygen again at once because of her panic. And then I thought, oh, maybe they shouldn't come anymore. Or it was so hard because I tried to protect her, but it was also important that they saw that how it was going with her. And then she needed medicine for her stools as well because of the morphine. And it was a roller coaster, and it was horrific because she started fighting me about this medicine and pleading with me that, please, Mama, can I maybe not have this one because it tastes so bad? Or can I only have one medicine and not two, please? Please, Mama, only one. And sometimes I would literally just do the one because she already got so much and did so much. And I had to force again these things upon her. And she was so small. And such a precious child. So always when I see like videos from parents that they have to do these treatments on their children because their children are ill and the child has pain from that, it's like it hurts me so bad because I understand how all of that feels. And yeah, it's unbelievable, that world and that pain. So then we were just together and trying the very best that I could. And at some point there came a time where Lumi only wanted to hold on to me the whole time. And when we went to bed, that she would hold my hand, and we were sleeping there together, and she would just want to hold my hand the whole time, not let go. until she fell asleep. And in her waking hours, she was telling me any moment that she could how much she loved me. So every time that she could, she would say, "Mama, I love you so much. I love you, Mama." And the moment that started happening, we always said that to each other. But the moment I saw this shift happening, that she wanted to be so close physically, and that she started to say, "I love you" so many times, I knew she was saying goodbye. So I knew the time was near. And then on the 14th of August, the hospice nurses and doctor came around, and they looked at her condition and they said, she still probably has 2 more weeks to live. And I thought, but how is that possible? Because she is doing very badly. She only needs oxygen pretty much the whole time, because otherwise she cannot breathe. She barely eats. So, but they said, no, we think 2 weeks. I thought, okay, and let's see. And before I tell you about that night, because that night is the night that she would pass, I first want to show you a little clip of Lumi when she was alive. Because Lumi was very, very much alive. And all the footage that you see is made by my sister, who stayed with us for a month when she heard of the diagnosis and everything, and who went with us to the hospital and who experienced all the traumatic things that were happening over there. And she had this wonderful idea to film Lumi. So all this footage is from her in that period of time where we already received the diagnosis and Lumi was very ill. And a few weeks later, after this footage was made, Lumi would die. So if you look at this footage, then maybe you understand that if I would tell people that she was really sick, that they would say, but look at her, she's fine. Because this is how she looked, although I can see that she was not fully fine. But you will still see this beautiful, wonderful child. So take a look. So on the 14th to 15th of August 2024, at 3 a.m. in the morning, Lumi would suddenly sit up straight in her bed. And she let out this scream, and this scream is one that I recognized from her first and second attack. So I asked her, it all happened in seconds. I asked her, are you ready to take the medicine? And she said, almost. And that ended up to be her last word. Almost. Because from that moment on, she would collapse. And then she was actively dying on my bed for 30 minutes. And that is something that I somehow never anticipated or never expected to happen. And because I'm used to very intense situations from my work as well, I somehow can keep my composure. So I try to keep as cool as possible so that she wouldn't be afraid or scared. But of course, I saw what was happening to her body and how every organ was shutting down. And the sound that her lungs made, and the spasms afterwards, and it was 30 minutes of that and holding her, but also trying to still save her with the oxygen and speaking to her and holding her. At some moment I also saw that the lights went out in her eyes, so then I knew, okay, her soul has left. She is up there and I am here. So then, when it was all over, I was like wailing over my child. I always promised Lumi that we would stay together, no matter where we were, that we will always be together. So, after an hour of going back and forth, I took everything out that I prepared in advance so that there would be no questions what would happen, what would have to happen with the house or the car or our cat. So I made everything ready. And then I did what I had to do to go up there with my child, because she was all I had. It was just me and her and the cat in that house. And she was my whole life. But in the second follow-up video, I will tell you about everything that happened afterwards and how everything unfolded, because it was a whole happening. So for now, thank you for listening, and I hope you remember my daughter as alive as she is. And she is still alive, but in a different way. God bless.